Texas is a great place to live and a great place to do business. By every economic indicator, job creation, business growth, income and housing growth, the Texas economy, the 8th largest economy in the world, has made our state a hub to global markets, creating and maintaining vital and growing communities for every Texan. But the prospects for Texas weren't always so bright. Just over a decade ago, the Texas economy and the integrity and health of hundreds of Texas communities were threatened by a culture of corruption and meritless lawsuits perpetrated by thousands of personal injury trial attorneys. Texas had become a symbol of public distrust and disgust with the court system. Fairness, balance, and honest justice was hard to find. Distortions in our civil justice system had a terrible impact on local economies and was fraying the fabric of our society.
Widespread reports of corruption as to members of the Texas Supreme Court, being cozy with plaintiff lawyers or making improper promises to litigants before the court.
People, especially businesses, do not want to come to a state in which they believe that their entire business, whether it's a small business or a large multinational business, could be at risk because of jackpot justice.
We had one of the worst of all counties in the state was located just south of Houston, Matagorda County, in which the death of a bull achieved a damage verdict of $8 million, when in other parts of the state the death of a human being would be less than $1 million. Doctors in particular were the target of unmeritorious lawsuits, and that continued through the 90s and right up until a few years ago, when finally all but 3 malpractice insurers had pulled out of the state, and doctors were simply crying for relief.
Texas courts became notorious for their corruption. In February 1995, the Wall Street Journal called Beaumont the lawsuit capital of Texas. And then there was the expose on 60 Minutes.
The practice was pretty widespread that the plaintiff attorney would seek a venue, a court, in which to bring the cause of action that was favorable to the objective that they were seeking.
We were called the Wild West of litigation back then. The London Observer even wrote that businesses in Texas should consider moving elsewhere because our civil justice laws were so destructive to free enterprise.
I've been a licensed Texas real estate broker here in Houston for over 30 years. Practicing, I have my own real estate company. And from the day that I started in the business, there was always a fear of being sued. And the punishment was horrific. And the good guy was getting punished in a lot of cases.
I was served with a lawsuit, in my place of business, advising me that I was being sued for $50,000. And this was in 1959. I learned not to have a certain distrust, of certain things. And I started increasing my insurance limits, and I started, taking a lot more precautions. I started getting a lot more paranoid, about the way people would come after an innocent victim, sometimes with financial gain in mind.
But when concerned Texans went to Austin asking how to change the system, they were told that reform was impossible. Personal injury trial lawyers, fueled by their huge wealth, controlled the state legislature, and all attempts at reform had proven futile. But a small group of concerned Texans persisted, taking on the challenge that so many believed to be hopeless.
A group of volunteers got together about 13 years ago and started talking about the egregious and outrageous lawsuits in Texas and decided to do something about it. We started going around the state of Texas recruiting business and civic leaders. And we literally went from Abilene to Harlingen, all the way over west to El Paso to Texarkana in the east, recruiting business and civic leaders that were going to help us reform the civil justice system, and it proved to be very, very productive. And until today, we have over 15,000 members across the state, representing over 1,200 different professions, trades, and businesses from over 750 different cities. So it's an incredibly diverse and active organization.
After comprehensive research, Texans for Lawsuit Reform proposed carefully worded statutes to lawmakers. After tens of thousands of letters, phone calls, and faxes were sent to legislators in 1995, 8 separate civil justice reform bills passed and were signed into law. Since 1995, Texans for Lawsuit Reform has continued to build upon these reforms. Texas judges now have the right to require that out-of-state lawsuits be tried in their home states rather than being moved here. Defendants are only liable for their own percentage of fault in a lawsuit, curtailing one of the most egregious abuses in legal history. Fraudulent asbestos and silica lawsuits have been stopped. Persons who are not sick cannot file a lawsuit claiming they might get sick in the future. And one of the most notorious practices, venue shopping for the most favorable judge or jury in the state, ended with a law that generally requires lawsuits to be tried where the dispute or injury occurred.
Tort reform has brought back business to Texas. We've got a steady stream of doctors coming back into the community to fill those positions and more.
We've got now almost 40 carriers that are writing policies in the state. We're seeing new doctors come in. We've seen obstetricians that gave up OB and only did gynecology now have reopened for obstetrics. We're seeing areas such as my community that now have 24/7 neurosurgery coverage, whereas we were down to only 2 nights out of every 5 nights being covered. We're seeing doctors looking at areas that were previously very high-risk parts of the state or practices that were very high risk.
Medical malpractice reforms, passed by the legislature and approved by the voters, capped non-economic lawsuit damages while making sure victims are protected and making it possible for many specialists, obstetricians, orthopedic surgeons, and neurosurgeons to remain in practice or begin practicing in the state. And a record number of new doctors have been licensed here since the reforms.
The Toyota Corporation moved their truck plant to San Antonio. And one of the reasons they moved their truck plant to San Antonio is because Texas as a state has reduced frivolous lawsuits by the work of Texans for Lawsuit Reform.
Site Selection Magazine selected Texas as the #1 place in America to do business.
We got the best business climate in the nation because taxes are low, regulations are reasonable, and we've passed sweeping lawsuit reform.
The Lone Star State, once the home of one of the nation's most dysfunctional civil justice systems, where change was impossible, has become a national model. But the fight for a fair and balanced civil justice system in Texas is far from over. Texas lawsuit reform has championed many reforms of Texas law and now must also focus on the other 2 pillars of our courts, juries and judges. The jury selection process in Texas is often manipulated to produce a partial rather than an impartial jury. Many Texans who answer the call for jury service are subjected to inappropriate and intrusive questions and find the experience frustrating and a waste of time. And while most Texas judges are dedicated, honest public servants, the Lone Star State is still widely criticized for its judicial hellholes, courthouses where there are serious questions about corruption and the integrity of the process.
Public policy can be impacted by individuals organizing together. That is the real secret of success of Texans for Lawsuit Reform. We are not top-down. We are not Austin Association driven. We are a true citizens movement to favorably impact the civil justice system in Texas. We need your help. We need the help of every Texan who believes that it is important to the integrity of our governmental system that we have a fair, balanced, predictable, and common sense civil justice system. Please join us.
Please visit our website for information on how you can become involved at www.tortreform.com.